Do you feel drawn to learn more about witchcraft and the occult, but feel lost on where to start? Then welcome to Get In Loser, We're Doing Witchcraft, a podcast all about what it means to be a witch and where to get started on your journey.
Join us as we navigate through various witchy topics and share what we have learned about the craft. So get in, witches, and welcome to the 4th episode of our Spooktober series all about Samhain.
Yeah, so before we get started, we wanted to take the opportunity to plug our book club that we're doing on Supercast. So this is a Supercast only exclusive situation. And this is something that we've started this month and we are doing every month. And if you are listening to this episode and you're like, oh my God, a book club, that sounds awesome, I want to join. But you're like, but they've already started this month. That's okay. You can still join.
Perfectly fine.
Yeah. And the episodes that we've recorded already that are on our Supercast website, you will have access to all of those. So if you want to go back later and read and then listen to it as you're reading, that's awesome too. And if you want to join our next month's book, you can. But what book are we reading this month, Tiffany?
Well, it's over 3 months, right?
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
JK.
I was like, hold on.
Yeah, I meant over 3 months.
Yeah, it's a bigger book, so we broke it up across 3 months. It's New World Witchery by Corey Thomas Hutchison, and so far it's amazing.
It is really interesting.
Yeah,
and if you're in and you don't even have to be like in North America or anything to really like this book, because I mean, I feel like when I'm reading it, like I can connect to a lot of the things because I'm American, but then also it's so interesting to read a book that's about like North American witchery, because a lot of stuff that we even just research for the podcast, that it ties in, which of course obviously ties in back to Europe a lot, but it's cool to read about some of the things that we have that are just native to America or that have evolved from other traditions and how it has exploded in like
Yeah, and I like that. It also it talks about like witchcraft from Mexico and like the Native Americans that were obviously here before us, but it also ties in some of like Russian traditions and Irish and English and Germanic traditions that have migrated to America. So I think that's pretty cool.
It is, yeah. It's really cool because, you know, a lot of times too, I feel like whenever you read about anything about America, a lot of times, and just Americans in themselves, I feel like an identity crisis because we're trying to trace back these roots, but we don't really, like if you're an American and you, like, I think we've talked about this already on the podcast, but if you're an American and say you have German ancestry, like you will identify more with the other Americans around you that have no German ancestry than you would somebody who lives in Germany. And so like, it's cool to see how these traditions came from like Germany and like you said, Russia and like any of the Slavic countries and England and Ireland and everything. And then it comes to America and how it just evolves and changes and kind of intersects with a lot of the indigenous traditions that were already in America.
I agree. I really like it so far. So if you're not on our Supercast and you want to join, we include that in our show notes and it's on our socials, like in our bios. We do book club now once a month. So on the first of each month, we will upload our discussion. And it depends on the book, if, you know, like how big the book is versus how long it'll take us to read it. But so some of them might be a month and some of them might be 3, like this one.
Exactly. Yeah. And it's never too late to join. So if you're interested, like Tiffany said, the link is in our bio.
So what are we talking about today?
Woohoo! It's our favorite. It's Samhain.
I'm so excited for this episode.
Me too. And it was so cool. I mean, obviously we knew a lot about it already, but it was cool to kind of dive in and look at some research behind it and just reading.
Or
reading
even
all
just
about
expanding, like I knew what a dumb dinner was, but like going through and like really fully learning about it and understanding it was really cool too.
Yes. And then like I read your notes already. And so just reading about it and seeing exactly how it's done and why and everything, I'm just like, I kind of want to do it this year.
Anthony was like, let's just spend Halloween just us and do a dumb dinner. And I was like, okay.
I love it.
100%. I will do that.
Yes.
So I love that he's always just like, yeah, let's do it. Come on.
Mm-hmm. Oh my gosh. We love a amazing partner who is super supportive.
For sure. So Samhain occurs on the evening of October 1st, and it ends on the evening of November 1st for the Northern Hemisphere. And in the Southern Hemisphere, it's April 30th through May 1st. Some other names for Samhain would be November Eve, Feast of the Dead, Feast of the Apples, Hallows, Halloween, Shadowfest, Third Harvest, Harvest Home, Day of the Dead, Spirit Night, Candle Night, Ancestor Night, Nutcrack Night, which made me laugh really hard for some reason, probably because I'm a child, Apple Fest, Allantide, and All Hallows Eve.
I've never heard of Nutcrack Night before.
Right? And I even looked it up and I was like, it was literally just like a certain group of people that like, I mean, like, you know, it's a harvest season. So it was just like all about like cracking the nuts. So they called it Nutcrack Night. I was like, this is a really funny name for like such a boring answer. Like a boring reason on why it is.
Like I thought you were just going around kicking people in their balls. Like,
yeah.
There you go.
Cracking nuts.
Yeah.
No, it's really boring. They were just literally cracking nuts.
No.
Yeah.
Okay.
Nothing cool. Nothing cool.
Nothing cool. So Samhain is one of the 8 pagan holidays, and the name Samhain derives from Old English, which means summer's end. And even though this is an old Irish translation, when we say ancient pagan Celtic practices, like within the episode and we discuss them, this also includes Scotland, Wales, and the Isle of Man. And it's derived from an ancient, like I said, Celtic festival. A lot of traditions surrounding this holiday have evolved throughout the years. Samhain marks the end of the harvest season, as well as the end of the year and the end of the summer season.
Samhain is a time of reflection for the last year and of coming to terms with life and death, as well as a time to fully celebrate the dead. It's also considered one of the most potent nights of the year for magic. It marks the Celtic New Year, and it's the division of the year between the lighter half being summer and the darker half being winter. And it's also when the division between the spirit realm and the physical realm is at its lowest, making contact with the dead much easier. The Celts believe that night preceded the day, so that's why Samhain begins on the evening of October 31st, and then it runs through the following evening.
And this belief that the veil is at its thinnest is really prominent during this time. And when I was researching about this and just watching like more like YouTube videos and whatnot about it with Samhain, and as Tiffany said, this is the time of year where contacting the dead is easier. And that's because there's this belief that the veil is at its thinnest during this time. We also see this with Beltane as well. And it's during this time, it's considered the liminal time of year, both Samhain and Beltane, because it's like this in-between zone. So it's like the end of one season, the start of the next. And so that space between life and death and the realm between the spirits and the living is at its thinnest because of this transitional time. And that's where we get this belief.
Samhain is one of the 4 greater sabbats and fire festivals of the year, and it's marked as being the most important of the 4, as this was the time of harvesting and preparing for winter and the darker half of the year. Samhain bonfires symbolize man's attempt to aid the sun on its journey as it began to lose its strength and the days grew shorter. It was believed that the sun descended into the underworld at this time, and the darker period allowed the god of the underworld and his creatures, like ghosts, fairies, and other nondescript creatures, to then walk the earth until the sun's return. It's also the time in the god and goddess cycle where the god dies to be reborn through the goddess at Yule.
So there are a lot of traditions that are under the whole like umbrella of Celtic traditions as it relates to Samhain. And if you hear my dog barking, I'm really sorry. He's barking at somebody on the trail, apparently. Don't know who let him outside.
This is a likely instance to happen today on both of our ends because my husband is at work, which means the puppy is on her own right now, which usually means she barks a lot.
Yeah. So ancient Celtic traditions had Samhain being celebrated the 3 days before October 31st and through 3 days after October 31st. And it was considered a mandatory celebration. And there were many different feasts and activities going on during this time. And obviously, like, it's celebrating bringing in the last bounty of the year. So this is a time where they would slaughter the animals and preserve them for winter. And it was known as the holiday of death because they are understanding that life is ending, but the wheel continues to turn and new life will begin anew. So it's also the birth of new things and not just death. And there's always that assumption that that rebirth is coming. So
I am glad that you talked about this because I had read about the mandatory celebration part and I was going to look more into it and just completely forgot to go back and research that because there was something that I like one of the pages that I had read through for Samhain talked about how it was a mandatory celebration and that if you were caught not celebrating and participating in Samhain activities like back during ancient Celtic times, that you could actually be put to death.
Wow.
Yeah. And so I want to say this was like, I was looking on like the History Channel's website because they had an entire thing on Samhain, but I wanted to research that more and I forgot about it.
Oh my gosh. Could you like, first of all, why would you not want to celebrate it? Like
also imagine you're like, oh, I don't really have it in me this year. And they're like, Samantha didn't celebrate Samhain. Turn the gallows.
Yes, we're killing you. We're
killing you for being the worst witch.
Yeah.
Normally we accuse non-witches of being witches, but we're accusing this witch of being a sucky witch.
Right. Yeah.
She's not upholding Samhain traditions. Yeah, so I forgot to go back and research that. So if you guys are bored and just want something to research, that is a little like historical mandatory celebration thing that I would definitely look up.
Yeah. So during these celebrations, it also marked the end of trade and warfare for the year. So various tribes would connect and come together during this time. And it was, I mean, obviously, it was just peaceful. Like there was no fighting or anything going on when these tribes would meet up. And these tribes were, just a few weeks before that at war with each other. So there would be a ton of drinking, contests, and feasting. And a lot of what we know has been passed down through like oral history or like pictures that have been carved on things. We don't have like any written accounts that predates Christianity on this, just basically what's been documented by Christians observing it, but then also oral history passed down through the ancient Celtic people. But usually these celebrations involve some kind of sport, and the most popular sport during Samhain was horse racing, which I thought was kind of interesting. And of course, one of the best, like the biggest aspect of the whole celebration were bonfires. They were incredibly important in the celebration of Samhain. Again, we don't know a lot, but what we do know is that the hearth fires were left to burn out while the harvest was gathered. And the Druids were very important in the celebration of Samhain. And so they would come and they would light a sacred bonfire for Samhain, and they would use a wheel that would cause friction and spark flames. I'm not sure, I don't know, but that's just what it said online. So I don't know what made it cause friction, but who knows? But what would happen is everybody would take a torch and they would light their torch from the sacred bonfire on Samhain, and then they would bring it back to their home and light their hearth fire with it. And so like everybody was benefiting from this communal bonfire, which I think is beautiful. I wish we still did stuff like that today. And then the Druids would toss in sacrifices into these bonfires, and often there would be two bonfires lit. And so the Druids would also like walk between the two bonfires, and they would bring livestock through the bonfires as a way of cleansing. And that's something that we also saw in Beltane with getting like the animals to the field. I remember us talking about that. But so they do this again at Samhain. And then another thing that the ancient Celtic people did was that they would leave offerings for ancestors as well as the Fae outside of their door. And often these offerings would be milk and honey, so that the Fae would just leave them alone and not bother them. So again, like with this liminal time, Fae were known to be able to cross that space between like the magical and the dead and the spirit realm into the living. And so Fae in Irish culture was something that they just needed to be very wary of. So they would always leave out offerings.
I love that the Fae tie into pretty much every like sabbat. I feel like everyone that we have covered this far, there's something about them. I want to say that it was Beltane that you could anoint your eyes with thyme oil and it would help you like see the Fae and like be able to see the dance of the seed and all of that.
Yes.
And then there was like I can't remember which the other one was, but it was something similar to that, like a way to be able to see the Fae or whatever. And now they're like, please leave us alone. Like,
yeah,
they tie into every holiday or Sabbath, like in some way. And I think it's funny. So like Sam said, there are a ton of Celtic Samhain traditions. So I just kind of pulled some of the more generalized historic traditions to go over. So something that is, I feel like, a bigger theme out of all of the ones that we cover is just honoring your ancestors that have passed and inviting them home while also warding off any harmful spirits. Because this is like a time when the veil is at its thinnest, this is a time that like you can spend honoring your ancestors as well. Costumes were worn to help disguise a person as a harmful spirit as a way for them to avoid other evil and harmful spirits. And this is just a tradition that we see carried on today, where people dress up on Halloween and little kids go trick-or-treating in their costumes. So yeah, like back during like ancient Celtic times, wearing costumes was a way to protect yourself. Samhain bonfires were lit because fire is considered the earth's counterpart of the sun. Souling was a tradition of going from home to home, begging for a treat in exchange for a prayer for the dead. And today this equates to trick-or-treating, but prayers for the dead are no longer customary. Pagan Saxons slaughtered their livestock for winter fare, as well as to make sacrifices to the gods who would help them survive the winter. They referred to November as Blood Monath, which meant blood month. And then a dumb supper can be held. If you want a good example of this, I got this from Wild Witchcraft by Rebecca Beyer, and she spells out her entire tradition and like the types of food she makes from start to finish. It's honestly like really cool and makes it really easy if this is something you want to try. So in this case, dumb means silent. And historically, dumb was used to refer to those who were not able to speak. So rude, but it's a historical
What can you do?
thing. Yeah. So this is a dinner that's eaten to honor the dead on Samhain. By partaking the entire dinner in silence, you're allowing your loved ones that have passed on a magical space to commune with you. Dumb suppers can be done alone or with family and friends, and they're usually done by candlelight. You basically just need to make some food, take time to like welcome good spirits into your home, and then light candles. You ring a bell 3 times and continue with all of the following in silence. So basically, once you ring the bell, you start your dinner in silence. So what you have to do is set your table backwards. So you would place your cups, then your silverware, then your plates, and you include an extra setting for the dead. And once everything is set, you serve the food, including food for the dead with a little bit of everything. You consume your meal in silence while paying close attention to the shadows cast in the candlelight. So like I said, you're going to do this by candlelight with the lights off. I forgot to like mention that you start like once you ring the bell, you also turn the lights off and light your candles. And so like while you're eating, you watch the candlelight to see like the shadows or the way the flames moving, and it's said to bring you messages from your ancestors that you're honoring. Once the meal is finished, you blow out the candles in the dark, you wish the spirits farewell, and then you would ring the bell 3 times again and turn the lights on to send any lingering spirits away. And if you like get Wild Witchcraft and read her section on Samhain and how she does the dumb dinner, she also has like what you can say to welcome the spirits in and what you can say to like bid them farewell. I thought it was really cool.
I like that.
Yeah. We talked about this a little bit in I believe our last episode was our Halloween superstition one, right?
I think it was the one before that.
So a couple of episodes ago, like within the last couple of episodes, we covered Halloween superstitions, and we talked about how turnips used to be carved in place of jack-o'-lanterns. But, obviously now we carve jack-o'-lanterns, but it's a way to ward off evil spirits and a form of protection for your house. Other festivals that are in line with Samhain, so there's the Diwali or the Deepavali festival. This is a Hindu festival known as the Festival of Lights, and it marks the Hindu New Year. And then Dia de los Muertos is Mexico's Day of the Dead.
Yeah, and kind of branching off of that and just talking a little bit more about Dia de los Muertos. I don't know how to speak Spanish. I took French, so I don't know what I'm doing. But it's the Day of the Dead in Mexico, and it's celebrated between October 31st through November 2nd. And this is a Mexican holiday where ancestors are remembered and celebrated. And it isn't gloomy or macabre by any means. It's usually very colorful and festive, especially if you've seen the movie Coco, you will understand. But during this time, it is customary to visit graveyards, decorate the graves of their deceased loved ones, and spend time there. And often the streets from the graveyard are lined with flower petals to guide the spirits to their family's home.
That is so cute.
Isn't that cute? I love that. I bet
so
it's
cute.
Beautiful.
Right?
They also build altars called ofrendas, welcome the spirits of their loved ones. And these ofrendas were filled with food, and it said that the aroma and the essence of the food is what's consumed by the spirit. And then the living then eats the food, and usually they'll share it with their friends and neighbors as well. And usually the altar includes sugar skulls with the deceased loved one's name put on it somewhere, marigolds, and pan de muertos, which is a special bread made for the occasion. And historically, though, before colonization, the dead were buried close to families' homes. And there was this cultural belief in Mexico that the deceased should remain tied to their living families. But this changed when the Spanish came to Mexico, and people were then buried in cemeteries. But the traditions live on and are merged with what we know now as the Day of the Dead. And so that's kind of where this came from. It's kind of like a meshing of the two cultures. And the spirits return to the realm of the living for one day to spend time with their families. That's the whole purpose. And I didn't know this part. I thought it was pretty interesting. So children and infants, if they've passed away, they arrive on October 31st at midnight and spend that day with their family. But the adult deceased relatives arrive the following day.
I wonder why.
I don't know. Yeah.
It's
why don't they just come together? I don't know.
Yeah. Spend the whole time together, but who knows?
Yeah. And then
it's such a beautiful, I don't know, what is it? A ceremony? Just the thought of just all the flower petals and just foods with all the smells to share with your past loved ones, but then taking that food and sharing it with your neighbors.
Yeah. I think it's beautiful. And it just brings about that community that you see a lot in a lot of these other cultures. And I just wish that we were more communal like that nowadays.
Yeah, no.
But what can you do? So another one that I researched a little bit is Obon. And Obon is a Japanese festival that is celebrated August 13th through the 15th and sometimes in July as well. So it's not necessarily celebrated during when we would celebrate Samhain, but it has a lot of the same ties to it. So this is a Buddhist festival that's been celebrated for well over 500 years. And this Japanese holiday commemorates the remembrance of deceased loved ones. So during this time, it's believed that spirits of past loved ones can come back to visit their relatives, and they will create paper lanterns called chochin and they're hung to guide spirits, and they do oban dances as well. And these are called bon odori, and they perform them to like guide the spirits and to pay honor and respect to them. And then in some places, bonfires are lit to guide the spirits too. So kind of a interesting, it's just interesting to me to see how so many different cultures have so many the same beliefs.
Yeah.
But in Western like society, we've kind of branched out from that, which is sad. But
yeah,
families will visit the burial sites of their loved ones, and they will bring food and offerings to like temples and altars around the grave sites. And then at the end of the festival, the families will guide their spirit loved ones back to their graves with their chochin lanterns. And in some places in Japan, the lanterns are floated down rivers to allow their family spirit to be released into the sky, which I thought was beautiful. So I'm hopeful that when we get to Japan, we'll be able to see something like that.
It would be so cool if we had stuff like that in America. But it's like you said, it's like we don't even have the community aspect to begin with. Like there is in other countries. It is one thing I miss about living in Germany is that like even going to just something as simple as like Oktoberfest, where the whole thing is centered around drinking and eating like pretzels and, you know, stuff like that. Everybody comes together and you sit with people that you've never met in your life, and you spend an entire day with these people sharing stories and just sharing time and fun and laughter. Whereas like in America, if you were sitting at a table and some random stranger came and sat up, you'd be like, why are you here? Who are you?
Exactly. Yeah, that is true.
It's such a different like lifestyle and take on everyday life.
It really is.
So as with everything, customs evolve over time. Christianity attempted to reframe Samhain as a Christian celebration. In the 5th century, Pope Boniface moved the celebration to May 13th as a day to celebrate saints and martyrs. But then in the 9th century, Pope Gregory moved it back to its original dates, declaring it All Saints' Day, and it was celebrated on November 1st. They also created All Souls' Day for November 2nd as a way to honor the dead as well.
When I was reading about like where the name Halloween came from, it was basically merged from that. And so it's like a mixture of the All Saints Eve, All Saints Day, All Hallows Eve, and All Souls Day. And that's how they combined it to kind of create Halloween. And so you see Halloween, like the term being used in the 15th century. Also, another name that they would use was All Hallow Tide, which I've never heard that one before.
Me either.
Which is weird. But they essentially, I mean, they change the traditions, of course, because they have to change everything. But at its core, you know, the holiday's still there.
Yeah. Typical. I feel like Schmidt in that scene of New Girl. A white man. No. Typical.
Literally, a white man.
Yeah, literally. Some correspondences for Samhain. Your symbols are going to be black cats, bats, ghosts, scarecrows, autumn flowers, bones, corn stalks, colored leaves, crows, gourds, Indian corn, pomegranates, pumpkins, scythes, and the waning moon. And a lot of these, I feel like a lot of it kind of repeats itself because for some reason, I couldn't find a lot on correspondences outside of like maybe 3 references for some reason for Samhain. I feel like every time I look up correspondences for any of the sabbats, it's like an abundance of various things and they organize them all so differently. So I found like maybe 3 and they all listed things like symbols were just like a jumble of everything. And then your other correspondences were broken down like we always do them. So if they're repeated, that's why. The element for Samhain is water. Your deities for goddesses, you're going to have any and all crone goddesses. Caradwen, Hecate, Hel, Oya, the Morrigan, Lilith, Kali, Ishtar, Rhiannon, Persephone, Inanna, Baba Yaga, Isis, Pomona, Bast, and all death and other world goddesses, as well as the Banshee was listed multiple times.
Oh yeah, we love our Banshee.
No, I thought it was cool that it popped up because we literally just covered the Banshee. For gods, you have Osiris, the horn god, Hades, Herne the hunter, Cernunnos, Anubis, Loki, Odin, Bran, any and all death gods, and all dying and rising gods. For incense, you have copal, sandalwood, mastic resin, benzoin, sweetgrass, wormwood, and mugwort.
Yeah, and I basically found like the exact same things because you're right, there isn't a lot listed as far as correspondences, but the only other ones that I found that weren't listed were sage, myrrh, and patchouli.
I wonder why Samhain is harder to find correspondences for.
Yeah,
It's
it's just
interesting.
crazy because it's supposed to be like the most important one.
Well, and it's also like the one that I feel like everybody, even if you're not in the know, like in the pagan or witch community, like this is something that you know and you partake in some form of celebration for.
Exactly. Yeah.
You just call it Halloween.
Yeah.
So your colors and candles are going to be black, orange, yellow, red, brown, or white. Again, for these, you can really just kind of think of like your harvest colors or autumn colors. And then, of course, anything that resonates to you is going to work for a candle too. For your tools, the besom is used to sweep out the old year and the cauldron for transformation, but also pretty much any divination tool. So like tarot cards, scrying boards, runes, pendulums, mirrors, those kinds of things.
Yeah, and I was reading too online. I love this idea. So, we're always trying to talk to you guys about, you don't have to go out, you don't have to buy a bunch of things. You don't have to like have the, amazing cauldron or anything like that. And I was reading that if you don't have a cauldron, like a bowl filled with water or black ink is just fine. And I really like that idea because it's making sure it's inclusive of everybody, no matter where you are on your journey.
Yep. I feel like we said we were really good at the beginning of the podcast, like saying that constantly, like you don't have to go out and buy everything. Like don't make people make you feel any less for not having things, and improvise when you can,
Yeah.
You don't have to spend copious amounts of dollars to practice witchcraft or to be a pagan or make whatever you have work for you. For plants, you have pumpkin, apple, any grains, pomegranate, mugwort, wormwood, dittany of Crete, acorns, oak leaves, gourds, root vegetables, and rosemary, because it's rosemary is a plant of remembrance. And so, you're honoring and remembering your dead. So rosemary was a really important one. And that was just a small amount because this one was really long.
It was really
There's
long.
a lot of plants.
There really are. So some herbs and flowers. We have almond, apple leaf, autumn joy, sedum. I've never heard of that before.
Yeah.
Bay leaf, calendula, cinnamon, cloves, garlic, ginger, hazelnut, hemlock cones, mandrake root, marigold, mums, nettle, passion flower, pine needles, rue, sage, sunflower petals, and the seeds, tarragon, and wild ginseng.
For food, basically any and all pumpkin or apple dishes work, or root vegetables, meat, nuts, pomegranates, squash, roasted pumpkin seeds, cakes with tokens in them. And an example of this, and this is something that my husband and I make pretty much every Samhain, is barmbrack bread. So once we get closer to Halloween, I will be sharing that recipe as I make it on our socials. And if you're a Supercast subscriber, it will also be in our newsletter. For drinks, you can do mead, apple cider, mulled cider, or mulled wine. Your stones are going to be obsidian, carnelian, onyx, smoky quartz, jet, and bloodstone. Your animals will be bats, black cats, owls, as well as any livestock. Otherworldly creatures would be, I have little descriptions for each of these just because some of them I didn't know what they were. So I was like, if I don't know that, that's not saying much, but maybe someone else doesn't know either. So the first one is the puka. And the puka is believed to receive harvest offerings from the fields. The Lady Gwen, she's a headless woman dressed in white who chases night wanderers and is accompanied by a black pig. Fairies and seeds, which we've talked about already in this episode. Spirits, obviously, and this can be both bad and good. Ghosts and ghouls. The Dullahan is an impish creature that's sometimes like, it's basically like the headless horseman. So like it's a headless man on a horse carrying their own head. Their horses were described as having flames for eyes, and they were considered a death omen to anyone that encountered them.
I mean, if I saw that, I'd want to die. So
literally, well, and all I could think about was like Sleepy Hollow with Johnny Depp. I was like,
yes.
oh, like, or the TV show. Did you ever watch the TV show? It's newer, but still old. Newer than the Johnny Depp Sleepy Hollow.
Yeah, I think I started watching it, or I had seen maybe a couple episodes, but I didn't have the channel that it was on or something. Yeah. I never finished it, but
it's really good. Yeah. Anthony and I watched it like start to finish and loved it.
But he has no head. I love the Johnny Depp version.
Me so too. Funny. It is so
it's good. Really good, but it's pretty funny.
It is hilarious. Fairy hunters basically went around and kidnapped people. So
as they do, you know.
Yeah. And then the Slua, they basically broke into houses to steal people's souls.
I just, when I read this, because I didn't know that the Sluas were like real things, because they are in, what is that book series? These Twisted Bonds was the second one.
Is it the Hallowed Vows?
These Hallowed Vows.
These Hallowed Vows.
Yes. And I love that series so much. And so when I saw that, I was like, that's a real thing. I mean, you know, that's like a, the author didn't just make this up. Like it's actually from lore and legend. And
so those are your other worldly creature correspondences. Altar decor can be leaves, fall flowers, pomegranates, apples, pumpkins, corn, grains, corn dollies, gourds, nuts, seeds, chestnuts, acorns, photos of your ancestors, and really whatever is in season or is a symbol of this time of the year for you. And honestly, anything that we've listed before also fits into what can be put on your altar. Some ways to celebrate, you could just like simply take a walk, go out in nature, spend some time observing like the colors, the aromas, the sounds, any sensations of the season while reflecting on your year. You can decorate your home with Samhain symbols and colors.
And really, whenever you are looking at ways to celebrate, using seasonal imagery in just everything that you do. So this can even include the kitchen. So using gourds, apples, and pumpkins, basically whatever's in season right now and whatever represents the last of the harvest season to you in your area. So you could create a summer pot, roast pumpkin seeds, make pumpkin bread or pie, or even like a root veggie stew with some pork in it, because since pork is supposed to be really great to use during this time of year.
Yum. And if you don't eat meat, I mean, just a root veggie stew sounds delightful on its own.
I would
maybe with some lentils or something. Oh, I'd love that. You can create an altar for your ancestors with photos, heirlooms, and other mementos.
Yeah. And then with this too, I mean, as somebody who leaves offerings for my ancestor, my father, and then for my spirit guides, one thing that I will do for him, like whenever I do leave him an offering on my altar, is I will include whiskey, which is one of his favorite drinks. And then you can even do a food item. And I was reading about this. You can also incorporate a tarot card into your ancestor altar. And the one that comes up frequently is death, not because of death. And we just had our tarot episodes. It's all about that transformation, right? And so understanding, like having the death card representing that, okay, yes, they might have died in their physical sense, but they're still with you. And there's that transformation into the spirit realm. And it's this time of year where there's that liminal space and you can interact with them probably easier than other times of the year. So that's a really good tarot card to use on your altar if you like to put tarot cards on your altar. And then outside of just creating an altar, this is also a great time to work with your ancestors. So get in touch with your spirit guides as well. Maybe you have one of your ancestors as part of your spirit guide team, which is amazing if you do. And then also you can even visit a medium and try to connect with your ancestors or your recently deceased loved ones that way.
And then, like I talked about the dumb supper earlier, you could host a dumb supper, just holding space for your ancestors and your loved ones.
And with that dumb supper too, you can even leave the plate of your ancestors' food that you make them on your altar overnight as a way to, be more respectful to them if you would like.
When you leave food offerings, do you bury them or do you throw them out or do you eat them?
So it's crazy because one thing I have noticed, like whenever I only leave food up there for like that night. Like I don't just leave it up there. But I put it in my backyard. But one thing I've noticed, like when I put flowers on my altar, this is kind of off topic. When I put flowers on my altar, if I'm doing like an ancestral altar or something, they don't wilt like normal flowers do.
Okay.
And I don't know why. Like, I don't know if that's just, maybe it's where I'm putting them in my house.
Yeah.
Which I don't know why that would have any effect on it.
No, I don't think that would.
But I've noticed like for instance, I noticed it this summer whenever I did the last ancestral altar I did was back in June. And I had clipped fresh lavender from my front garden and put it in like a little vase or whatever. And I like had it up there for the whole month and the flowers never wilted or anything, but I had clipped other lavender and had it around my house, like in little bitty vases, like in the bathroom and stuff. And that like wilted and died and like all the lavender was falling out. But this one didn't.
That's
Isn't that
really
crazy?
Cool. I love that.
But yes,
I only ask because like I feel like that is a question that I had like when I had researched some of this stuff, and I read all different things. Like some people bury it, some people like just throw it away or pour it down the drain, and then some people were like, no, I eat it, and I was like, oh
yeah, I've always just left it. I think it's like, it'd be fine obviously to eat it too. But I like to like put it in the backyard and bury if it's something that can be buried. And then if it's something that can't, like whenever I made those cookies and I wasn't sure if like it would be a good idea to put like the sugar and stuff into the ground. And so that one I threw away. But outside of that, I'll just bury it in the backyard. And hopefully at our next base, like I want to get a compost, like a kitchen compost area. And so that would be a great place to put it as well. And then you can put it back into your ground when you're done.
Yeah. Interesting. The more you know.
Yeah.
You could tend to grave sites at a cemetery, leaving offerings like flowers, dried herbs, and water, and like just cleaning up the area and maybe cleaning the headstones kind of thing.
Yeah. And you can do this even if, say, like you are not living in an area where your loved ones are buried, even just visiting any cemetery or gravesite and giving back that way and doing those things is an amazing way to pay homage to the local ancestors of the place that you're living in. So it doesn't have to be your exact ancestors that you're, remembering and you're respecting during this time. It could be the ancestors of the place that you're inhabiting. I love watching the cleaning the grave videos on TikTok.
They're so satisfying.
They're so satisfying. It's amazing.
And then obviously we've talked about it multiple times in this episode, but bonfires. And if you don't have a space, like an outdoor space that you can light a bonfire, you can use a fireplace if you have one, use your cauldron, or even just light a candle. Something you can do to like further this, write down things that you wish to release in the new year and then burn them in the bonfire. Samhain is a time of like reflection and looking back over your past year and letting go and moving on to like new things. So you can write it down on a piece of paper or a bay leaf and just burn it in the fire to release it.
Yeah. Any sort of fire magic is wonderful during this time because it's all about that starting over, starting new, taking this transitional time and using it to its full advantage and understanding that change is coming, change is inevitable, that wheel keeps turning. So why not embrace it during this time is a great way to celebrate.
Yeah. And then something that most of us probably do anyways is you can dress up in a mask or a costume because again, this was like an old Celtic tradition to protect themselves from evil spirits. They would wear the mask or a costume that made them look like an evil spirit. Now this year, I feel it, or not this year, but now like this, in this time, it's like, how can I like make everybody laugh? What's the funniest costume I can wear? Or like, you always have the like sexy costumes or, but just participating in that is also a way to kind of keep those traditions alive.
It really is. And it's super fun. And it's a great way to tie into your community and try to establish that community. So there you go.
I sent Anthony I came across this couple's costumes yesterday, and it was the guy was dressed up like a lamp and the girl was a moth.
I love it. You guys should do that.
Right.
Mike and I like to do really scary ones or like really out of the box ones.
Mm-hmm.
And Mike is very like, he doesn't really like to dress up anyway. So if he does, like, it's got to be pretty basic. But this year he wanted to go as Bob from Bob's Burgers. So I'm going as Linda. Cute. And we were trying to get the kids to go as like Tina and Louise.
Yeah.
But they will have none of it. And I'm just like, oh my God, you guys are killjoys. They both want to go as animals, which is fine. But
you
it'd have been so cool.
One of them be Coochie Kopi.
That's what we told him. We said one of you guys could be Coochie Kopi, because I knew that neither one of them
could be a horse.
Right, exactly. That's what I told Emily. I said, you can go as a horse. And she was like, no, I'm not doing that. And I was like, because neither one of them wanted to be Tina. And I'm like, well, one of you guys can go as Linda. I will go as Tina.
Like, first of all, Tina would be the best costume ever.
Exactly. Yeah.
Look, just like, Anthony and I will go wherever you guys are going. He'll be Jean. I'll be Tina.
Perfect. Louise wasn't born yet.
Oh, well, I was going to say I'm probably more of a Louise, but
probably. Yeah. I'm just like, oh my gosh. But yeah. So my wig and glasses came today.
I'm so excited.
Just waiting for my apron comes tomorrow.
What were you last year? You were something hilarious last year.
I was the little lad.
That's right.
Berries and cream. And then what sucks about it though is like nobody knew who I was until I did
your friends
song. I know, just like, how do you not know? Like, this is the best costume.
You're like, this is very obvious. You should know this.
I really wanted Mike to do a couple's costume with me last year and go as that SNL skit, the Timothy Chalamet and Pete, what's his name? The one that dated Pete Davidson, whatever.
Anthony wants me to make him a shirt that has that whole thing on it.
Oh my God. I love that skit. I think it is so funny. And I'm like, it's perfect.
We do that all the time.
Yeah. I was like, this is all we need is like sweatsuits. That's it.
Yeah.
And then 2 wigs. That's it. And we'll just draw on our faces. Perfect costumes. He wouldn't do it. And I'm just like, there was like
an entire period of time where it would be like I would be in the kitchen and Anthony would be like doing something in another room and I just hear him go, "You never loved me, Mom."
I love that. It is one of the best SNL skits.
It's so funny.
It's so funny. But yeah, but I told him, I said, I really wanted to go as Reagan from The Exorcist, and I wanted Mike to go as the priest. And he wouldn't do it. He said no. I'm just like,
Michael, get it together.
I told him, I said, well, next year, that's what I'm going as, is Reagan from The Exorcist. So I hope you're prepared. We would love to know what you guys are dressing up for Halloween.
Yes.
Send us a message, tag us in your pictures on social media, and we will upload pictures of what we are going as well, so that you can see us in our amazing Halloween costumes.
I don't know if we're dressing up this year.
You guys dress up. Maybe not. Well, because I know you're doing the dumb supper, but
yeah, we're gonna do a dumb supper this year. And then like Anthony's also traveling, so he'll come back like on the 30th or the 31st. Like he's coming home that day.
Yeah,
essentially. Because he is going to see Rez in Spokane with Donald, because
rough life.
Rude.
Yeah, but if you do pass out candy or something, there you go. They're on a witch's hat and be a witch. I don't know. Do something. Take a picture of it and tag us to listeners. Whatever you wear on Halloween, however you celebrate Samhain, not Halloween, however you celebrate Samhain, however you dress up for the holiday, let us know. That's it for this episode of Get In Loser, We're Doing Witchcraft. You can find our source material for this episode linked in the show notes. If you love this episode, we would be forever thankful if you leave us a 5-star review on wherever you listen to your podcasts. If you really love the show and want more Get In Loser content, Check out our Supercast link provided in the show notes or search the Supercast website for Get In Loser, We're Doing Witchcraft. There you can purchase a membership to our podcast and obtain exclusives like getting episodes early, shoutouts on the show, access to our Ask Me Anything forum, our monthly newsletter, a promo code for merchandise, and more.
You can also find us on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram at Get In Witches, or email us at we'redoingwitchcraft@gmail.com. Check us out next week for our final Spooktober episode, where we will hopefully scare your socks off with some spooky stories. Until then, blessed be, witches.